Okay, greetings and welcome to another Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call Breaking the Monopoly. I want to start with the first story that we saw last week, and that was the story of Lorraine, the police officer who, well, she's nominated by the Daily Telegraph for a Woman of the Year award, and that should have really flagged up some kind of warning bells. Now, Lorraine's story is quite an emotive piece. I have nothing against Lorraine, I want to make that really clear. It's the story of a police worker who's on hand and knees going through the rubble of Grenfell, trying to identify body parts. It's a harrowing job.
We have been on our hands and knees. We have been digging. We have had to shovel. And we sieve as well to make sure that nothing goes astray.
But when I watched it, there was something about production values. It sounds really like I'm being petty. The music, just the vibe of it. And it felt very much as though we're being manipulated. But in contrast, we also saw a video report from Lucy Mahood, who's a London firefighter, and she too was involved in the Grenfell rescue operation. But the tone of her interview is one that's more in keeping with that of what we're looking for, which is people looking for justice.
In the last 3 years, we've seen our former mayor, now Foreign Secretary, close 10 fire stations in London, took away 29 fire engines, took away 600 jobs. In the borough of Kensington and Chelsea alone, the fire cover for that borough was reduced by 50%, and that's in the last 3 years.
Did that contribute to deaths, though? Would it have saved lives if that machinery and those resources had have been there?
If you're asking me, Eamon, if those 600 extra firefighters, those 29 extra fire engines and 10 extra fire stations, including Westminster and Knightsbridge, which were closed, if you're asking me if they would have helped save more lives, I would say it's too early to speculate, but I'll let your viewers make up their own mind.
So perhaps unsurprisingly, I find Lucy's contribution to the debate much more compelling and much more emotive than Lorraine's. And actually, I want to hear more testimony like that than some kind of like sob story. And again, no disrespect to Lorraine.
It's difficult to describe. It's almost like driving up to it, and every time I drive up to the building, so I've been there sort of 2-3 times every day since it's happened, you're just very aware that you're looking at a mass grave standing in West London. You know, you're seeing burnt baby grows. You're speaking to residents who are telling you that they've seen dozens and dozens of dead bodies. You know for a fact because you've spoken to your colleagues. And I spoke to one of my colleagues the other day, and he was in bits, and all he kept on saying is it was the children. There were so many children, we couldn't help them. So,
sticking with the Monopoly theme, let's go to the end of the board and consider exactly what's going on over there. I think this section we should really call Get Out of Jail, because that's exactly what's going on. And I say this because last week there was a whole lot of he said, she said going on. Now let me start from the beginning. What happened is that I think Danny, from the Assistant Commissioner at the London Fire Brigade, he actually made it clear that he had actually sent a letter to Kensington Council, to some minister there, warning them that the cladding that was used in a previous fire, one that took place in Shepherd's Court in Hammersmith in 2016, was exacerbated by the cladding. But something strange happened when this was released. The police got involved. Now this is explosive, because you see, when we now know that the London Fire Brigade had told the council, who in turn told the TMO, we now know that there is no excuse for why that cladding remained in place. So all this stuff might seem in the realms of conspiracy, actually now starts to make a lot more sense when you think about why the Justice for Grenfell campaign has been so insistent on making sure that whilst the TMO should not have any authority to actually have control over the lives and safety of residents in the area, they can't just disband and vanish into the twilight zone. So that's why their victory in delaying the TMO from being disbanded should actually be applauded. It might only be for 21 days, but again, this has given us more time to look into the circumstances behind who knew what and when. Talking about behind the scenes, while this is all going on, it's kind of like that program Soap. There's always things going on that we don't know about that media isn't covering. So while this was going on, there's actually a merger taking place between Notting Hill and Genesis Housing Association. Now, these two corporations in total are sitting on reserves of some £2 billion. So I'm asking that you keep your eyes out for all these other stories that are never making it to the media but are equally as important and still related to what's happening in the area. And so the final section of this week's Media Watch is probably the most serious, and this is the go to jail, go direct to jail to not past 200 section. Money, money, money. And I don't like talking about money. I find it very tacky. It's not the sort of thing I want to do, but in this context, we know that the Grenfell survivors themselves would be attacked if they talked about this. So let's crunch some numbers. Let's see what's going on. Now, £20 million or 20 million plus was donated by the public for survivors and their families, and this was fantastic. I mean, just the other day, another 2 million was raised in an auction, an art auction, and this again was donated to the families. So we know that there is money available. We know the housing situation, again, I've spoken about it, so I'm not going to talk about that today. The housing situation is atrocious, shouldn't be. This is what's going on. But the Reuters press agency did something kind of like a media watch. They kind of did what we do. And they analysed all the information that's out in the public domain about the families and survivors and who's been left over. And they looked at the Fatal Accident Act of 1976. They sat down with some personal injury lawyers and they did a calculation of how much money would the victims and the families and survivors receive. What was the likely sum? And the result was quite chilling. They calculated, looking at the law, looking at precedents being set in this country, survivors are looking in combined total of £4 million. That's, to place it in context, roughly 30 grand each. 30 grand. Look around your home. Look at your family. Look at your possessions. 30 grand each. Now, how does this work? How could this madness be any part of this reality? Well, let's see how the government has done it. They figure that unless there's compensation, unless there's a prosecution, unless they find a corporate body guilty, then there can't be any compensation. So that just takes out any damages. So what people are really being paid for is funeral costs, for housing. It's, I think everybody at a base level will receive, I think it's less than £13,000, 12,900 and something. That's the maximum amount of money that anyone can get. And then the law gets into this kind of like bits and pieces and caveats where if you've got dependencies or dependents, then they're entitled to a bit more. So like children who lost both their parents, and this has happened, there are children who have lost their parents. And so they would get perhaps at the maximum around 300,000. But of course, there are children who perished with their parents. There are elders who perish and they have no dependents. So in those cases, there's no extra payout, there's nothing. That person just gets their flat 13 grand, or which, you know, with a few extra expenses can total up to around 30 grand. £4 million. This is outrageous. And where this gets very sinister is like, so why would any civilized society do something like this at a time of such pain, bereavement? Well, if we look at America and we look what's happened in history, one of the things that I didn't know, I just found out this week, was that, I think it's in 1970, I'll have to check the date, there was a fire in America.
November 21st, 1980. At the time, the MGM Grand Hotel fire was the second worst hotel fire in U.S. history. 2 hours after the fire erupted, the firemen made their way to the 19th floor and above. There, they found smoke and heart attack victims dead or dying. And one room at a time, one body at a time, the scope of the tragedy began to unfold. In the end, 85 people were dead, about 700 injured. How could this have happened? How could so many people have died?
85 people perished. How much money do you think was paid out to the families of survivors? Would it surprise you if I told you that the total sum was $200 million? Think about that. 85 victims, $200 million. That's £250 million.
Owners of the MGM Grand were told even before the hotel was built that plans for fire safety should be improved. Sunday, the hotel's top management denied that, but this man, Las Vegas fire captain Carl Lowe, told NBC News he recommended improvements in 1972 during a meeting with the architects of the hotel.
MGM and over 80 product manufacturers and suppliers were sued. Eventually, over 1,000 claims were settled for a total of $223 million.
Now that you know that, does it make sense to you why the numbers keep going down? Why nobody wants to talk about there being over 100 people? Does it make sense to you? This isn't no conspiracy. I mean, please just go online and check the facts. Does it make sense to you why there's been a discrediting of the community, of the families, of the victims? I don't know. I think it's quite scary, quite horrific to think that anybody could be that inhumane, that this is a calculated decision to actually impoverish and thwart the families of justice. And I'm not for one moment saying that money is justice, but I'm saying that we know that there are corporations that are culpable. We spoke about that earlier today. We also know that with things like Brexit, human rights are looking to be scrapped. And of course, when human rights are scrapped, the Freedom of Information Act, which comes out of that, as we explained in our Grenfell MediaWatch report a few months back, is one of the assets, is that then it becomes harder to find justice. And the Freedom of Information Act is one of the things that secured the Hillsborough family's justice. We then know that deregulation becomes an issue, because then corporates can actually do what they want without any fear of punitive damages if they kill people. Something stinks.
17 people died on the ground floor, 8 from burns, the others from smoke inhalation. Fire investigator Mike Patterson.
If there had been sprinklers in there, we'd have had some water damage pour down in that deli area, and that would have been it. That would have been it. That's as far as it would have gone.
I feel personally that all we would have been doing at this particular hotel was vacuuming up water rather than putting out fire.
So I want to leave it there. I want to say that we do need to break this monopoly on power, on justice, on housing, on law, on rights, on decency. And I'm going to close as usual, say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.
Some made daring escapes, and others jumped.
We saw one lady jump from the other side over here, about 8 floors down.
Even after the fire was out, the rescue drama continued for hours.
When I got to the ladder, it tilted and broke, and the firemen pulled me back. And so we waited a while, and so this man had a heart attack in the room. And then we had to get the fireman and 4 others. We went on up the stairs and got on the roof and came on down in the helicopter.
Helicopters were crucial, airlifting people off balconies and hundreds off the roof. Below, guests were instructed to remain calm.